Hello, and welcome to Monster Island Radio, a show where we discuss one of our favourite movie franchises, Godzilla. Each episode, we pick a movie from the series and talk about the highlights, lowlights, and everything in between, and why Godzilla is one of our favourite monsters. Hello, I'm Ben, and I'm joined by...
Graeme, hello.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very excited to talk about this movie.
Same. I mean, I know this is one of our favourites when we were at uni, so I was looking forward to revisiting this one.
Exactly. I haven't actually watched it for like a decade, so it was really fun to go back to, and I feel like we were sort of working our way towards it through the other Millennium Era movies. This is really what we wanted to get to.
Yeah. I tried to summarise this plot, but I ended up just writing out pretty much the whole movie. And I think it might be beneficial for anyone listening because quite a lot happens, and I don't feel I'd really be doing it justice if we start talking about points in the movie without having explained it all at the start, really.
Even though I quite enjoy it, they skim over quite a bit, I feel.
How do you mean?
Just in the story, things happen sometimes quite rapidly, so I wouldn't be surprised if I missed a few things. So you might actually be able to remind me or inform me of stuff I wasn't even aware of going on. To
be honest, writing this summary, I've omitted a fair bit still, and it's still quite long. Right, I'll just get on with it actually. So we start by being introduced to our two main human protagonists. I feel like there's only really two, and the first one's Admiral Tachibana of the Japanese Self-Defense Force, and he's discussing a recent monster attack in New York City, which I felt this was like maybe it's a bit obvious, but it's a bit of a sly dig at the 1998 Emmerich Godzilla.
It's not even a sly dig, really, is it?
The thing is,
it's just
right?
A dig.
Yeah, because they're saying like, oh yeah, we don't believe it's actually the real Godzilla that attacked New York, and I'm like, I don't know, that was a bit cocky considering the last movie that came out, Megaguirus. I was like, come on. I know which movie I'd rather watch again if I was given a choice between Megaguirus and the 98 Godzilla.
I feel like it's something that it probably was funnier back in, 2004 when this came out.
2001, wasn't it?
2001.
Yeah.
2001. So, back in 2001, it probably would have been funnier, but hearing it now, it just kind of feels a bit kind of not bitter, but it's like a cute little joke that doesn't really work.
I feel like it's intended for a Japanese audience only, that one.
Or just like people who just don't like that movie, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, then soon after that, one of their submarines spots the dorsal plates of a large creature in the water when they're investigating a missing US submarine. Who is it? Spoilers. It's Godzilla.
What?
Yeah. And then titles roll, and then we're introduced to Yuri Tachibana, who's the Admiral's daughter.
Wow.
She works as a presenter for a TV production company called Digital Q, who specialise in sensationalist programming about monsters. When she's out filming with the crew, an earthquake occurs, presumably by the beast that rises in the village later that evening and is mistaken for Godzilla after killing a gang of bikers. And it turns out to be Barragan, everyone's favourite cute but ugly kaiju.
It's a favourite fugly creature.
Yeah, basically. It's sort of adorable. Got very cute eyes, I think. So Yuri and co discover that Barragan is one of three guardian beasts and is the god of the earth, alongside Mothra, who's the goddess of the sea, and King Ghidorah, who's the god of the sky. They've been in slumber for thousands of years after humans destroyed them. And the people who killed them ended up treating them like deities after they'd died, waiting for their return to protect them. Which is just really. I mean, just silly. Let's kill them. Like, oh, oops, they were gods. Anyway, so in order to fight off the new threat that's appeared, Godzilla, who's come back to life because of the restless souls from the Pacific War, they have to be reawakened.
It's because of stuff, really, isn't it? He's really come back just because of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's the god of destruction, according to the tagline in this movie.
Okay.
So, like, I think they have like an ancient rivalry, and the reason he's back so soon is because of the spirits of those who died in the Pacific War. So, like, the other beasts, they're still sleeping, but they haven't, because they need time to regain strength. But I mean, Godzilla's already there, so this is where what's his name? The old man Isayama. He's the one that has to try and wake them up, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So Yuri manages to convince her father that they are the legendary beasts, so that they can just focus their efforts on only taking down Godzilla. Barragan was the first to awaken, only to have Godzilla completely obliterate him in a pretty one-sided battle in Hakone. Certainly more interesting than our time in Hakone.
Yeah.
I mean, we spent a whole day.
I recognise the coach bus park, though.
Oh, did you? I didn't spot that, actually. I just remember thinking about it. Yeah, we spent a whole day travelling there to go part way up a mountain, to be up there for 10 minutes, not even get to see the shrine there, and then come back down again. Yeah. I'd take a kaiju battle any day over that. What a waste of a day. Anyway, after Barragan's defeat, Mothra and Ghidorah finally decide to wake up and stop Godzilla. After a struggle, Ghidorah is taken down, leaving only Mothra to fight. She tries her best, but soon gets taken down by Godzilla. As she perishes, her spirit flows into Ghidorah, making him rise again as the 1,000-year dragon, King Ghidorah. So he's back in the ring, ready to take down Godzilla again. But as it turns out, the only thing he's good for was creating the biggest explosion in cinematic history as he dies, because Godzilla destroys him again.
He pretty much one-shots him.
Yeah, basically. So what are we going to do? Well, the Admiral, he had a plan, sort of. His initial plan fails, so he ends up just going inside Godzilla's mouth when he's in the water, then drilling his way out of one of Godzilla's wounds in his shoulder, so that when Godzilla tries to use its atomic breath, it ends up blasting out of the new wound in his shoulder, and he kind of tears himself up from the inside out, ultimately killing himself. Which I think was kind of... Yeah. I think it's kind of fortuitous on the Admiral's part for that to happen. I don't think he expected that. But
I think he was hoping for the best.
Yeah, okay.
And that's pretty much the best possible outcome from his point of view.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll give him a pat on the back for that.
Yeah, fair enough. And there we have it. Now, this is probably one of the more divisive films out there, because we've got Godzilla as the bad guy and Ghidorah, of all guys, being the good guy.
Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it's really strange. Before we get into that, I'm just curious, does it hold up to your memory of our time watching it, back in our salad days, renting Godzilla VHS tapes from the uni library?
Our salad days?
Yeah.
What are you talking about, salad days?
You've never heard that term?
No.
It's like your heyday.
Oh, right. No, I've never heard that before. I was thinking we didn't used to eat salads when we watched this. Haribo's with the snack of choice.
That was it.
Yeah, because we used to rent Godzilla movies back at uni. It was like a sort of monthly ritual.
Yeah.
This one was kind of like the one we both liked the most back then.
Easily.
And yeah, I haven't really watched it since, not in full anyway. But yeah, I think there were things about it I didn't like as much, and because it's been so long since I watched it,
on the second viewing,
I couldn't really remember if I didn't like them first time, to be fair. Because all I remembered was the parts that I did like. Like, I really liked all the action, all the kaiju battles in this are very, very strong. It's got some nice effects. But there are also some parts that are tonally unspecific, I would say. And without having anybody to kind of clarify, I was like, I didn't really know where the movie was coming from the first half, because there are some things that happen that are kind of almost comical, but then I think they're supposed to be kind of genuinely horrific, and it's like...
Now, I think this could be something to do with the dub, actually, because again,
maybe,
for this one, I did watch both.
Okay.
And the Japanese one definitely had a more serious tone. So, because I remember thinking some of these moments are kind of laugh out loud funny.
Give me a moment, and I'll see if it was what I'm thinking of.
So
it probably is.
When you first see Godzilla walking through one of the towns, there's a woman in a hospital bed and she's kind of stuck there, and it's like she's like getting really panicky because he's getting closer, and then he just walks by and she's like, thank God for that, breathes a sigh of relief, and then silence for like a second, and then the next beat is Godzilla's tail swinging into the building, destroying her. And that was like, I laughed really hard at that. Yeah, it was so funny.
But you know, you're not supposed to be laughing, right?
But seeing it in the Japanese one, I didn't find it funny. It was still sort of funny, but it just had a bit more gravity. I think because the whole tone with the dub was much lighter. But then I did stop laughing when there was that kind of mushroom cloud after Godzilla uses atomic breath, and there was like a room full of that classroom of kids, and I was like, oh, that's pretty heavy.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because it shows you this woman in the bed. She's got her leg in a sling, so she can't get away. And yeah, like the Godzilla goes away, and then he kills her anyway afterwards. And it's so like it's like a joke, and it really highlights the parallel, I think, between comedy movies and horror movies, because they both kind of work the same way. It's like all storytelling is a form of setup and payoff, but with horror movies and comedy, there's always an element of misdirection to give you that surprise. And it's like they got it just right for a gag, but not for like a horror moment.
No.
And that's the thing, 'cause when it cut to the kids in the schoolroom.
Now, did you think that Godzilla was going to actually shoot the school kids? Because
it felt like it was a continuation of the joke.
Because he was like breathing in, and then it like immediately cut to that room of kids. It's like, oh my God, they're going to blow up.
The comic timing was unintentionally perfect.
Yeah, it was
but
really
like
good.
you, I kind of reasserted my viewing when the mushroom cloud was there. I was like, oh, actually, this is probably just some kind of mistake, and it's not supposed to be funny.
And like I was saying, I think because of the dub, and I wonder if when it was being translated, maybe the first draft was kind of like a straight up translation. And as they were doing it, I thought, it doesn't really work because I mean, in the West at least, when we think of dubs, we think of it in like in a comical sort of way. So if you think of like any like parodies where they do like kung fu movies and things like that, they have someone mouthing some pretend words and have a different voice, a different dialogue over the top. So it's like inherently quite a funny thing here. So if they try and do something serious in a dub, they're probably like, this isn't work. People are just going to find it funny. So let's just lighten the tone completely.
Maybe, but I kind of feel like there is a scene before all of this hospital bed classroom stuff where a guy is just like, he's using the urinal in the toilet, and then he just gets stamped on. And I'm like, I didn't find that funny. Ironically, like that didn't make me laugh, but I took that as a joke.
Yeah,
because it's kind of like the Jurassic Park thing where the T-Rex eats the lawyer off the toilet.
Yeah, and
it's just like, okay. It's there as a joke, and then if you say like if the dubbing changes how we perceive the movie, that doesn't necessarily change the way it's edited and cut and stuff necessarily. So maybe they did cut things around. It's not just necessarily like redubbing the dialogue. Maybe they've actually moved scenes, because it did feel like there was some of that going on, but I didn't watch both versions, so I can't really say.
It was the same,
but if the pacing's the same, then I might lay the unintentional humor at the kind of at the editing then.
I'm still going to put it with the dub, because like those funny, like kind of those moments like where he's at the urinal and the guy with the long wig, like those kind of like little like funny moments were still there and still intentionally funny.
Right.
But,
so you're able to compare and contrast like ones that they're funny in both versions, and one is funny in one version and not in the other, so you can kind of discern that.
Yeah, exactly. So the dub, it was all very, as you said, it's like unintentionally funny.
The kind of almost suicide but not was sort of like, that didn't really work in the Western version, I didn't think either, because it wasn't. This guy is like in the forest and he's tying his office tie around a tree branch. He's going to hang himself, and that's how he ends up. He just sort of falls through the earth. The earth sort of cracks, and he ends up falling into a little cavern. And you discover Ghidorah's down there. But the suicide attempt, I was like, why is this here? It was weird.
Yeah, this thing, it kind of like flirts with these serious topics, like the salaryman wanting to commit suicide in the forest, which is a common thing, which is like so dark.
Yeah.
And they have those kind of like those poignant shots where they're looking at the poster of nuclear war and stuff like that. And even Yuri to some extent, because it seemed like they were setting up her having kind of an alcohol problem, likely because of like the misogyny she faces at work and in the industry and her upbringing and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, there's kind of scratching at the surface of something like quite dark here. But then with those kind of tonal shifts, like I will say in the Japanese one, they still didn't focus on it as much as they probably could have. You know, they were kind of intimating at something a bit deeper, but didn't actually go through with it.
And that's kind of my overall view of the movie as well, because although you've given a very detailed plot synopsis, I would say that this movie, unlike most Godzilla movies, suffers from a character deficit. Rather than like having too much human stuff, the humans could stand to be a bit more developed.
That's the thing, yeah, definitely.
And usually we say the opposite, but this time I'm just like, well, the pacing's fine. It's just that, you know, all the time we spend with the monsters is perfect, and then we have all this screen time for the humans, and it's absolutely fine. The pacing's perfect, but the time we have with the humans is actually not used that well. So if you had the exact same runtime, just have slightly different scenes, you know, change the tone a little bit, give the human characters a bit more kind of depth, then it would probably be close to perfect Godzilla movie.
Yeah, I mean, then it would end up being, well, I think the time that we did have with the humans was fine. I think more time would have been nice, but then it'd be running into a longer film at that point.
Yeah, it would be intrusive.
Interest might start to drop off at that point. So there's kind of sacrifices have to be made, and I think that's where they were like, okay, we've got the idea with humans. We've laid the foundation. You guys can think about that yourselves while we go back to the monsters.
I suppose what I mean is that I was never irritated when they cut away from the monsters back to the humans, when normally that can be quite irritating.
Well, yeah, because they did they did it correctly. I mean, it helps liking the characters for a start.
I just wish the time that we had with them was used differently. Not that there was more time, just that they did other things in those scenes.
It was nice to have a Godzilla movie where they weren't afraid to actually have Godzilla just be an all-out bastard, just an evil character, because it doesn't always have to be he's the good guy and whatever, because you could end up just getting the same movie again and again. I feel like them just kind of flipping it around, like it still worked. It was still a strong film, but this is where, you know, it's so divisive that people are just like, well, no, he's a good guy. You know, he's there for XYZ reasons. And it's like, I think people could easily let themselves dislike this film because of that. But if you kind of just pull back a bit, you know, it's still a solid monster movie. Like the pacing was good, you know.
Is that why people tend to kind of not like it, because he's more the villain and they switch it around?
As is my understanding, yeah.
It's interesting, because if you think about it in terms of like James Bond or Batman that we have, when they do like an era of Bond or an era of Batman, you're pretty much settled into, okay, this is what the character's going to be like for the next few years, and you get comfortable with it. But with Godzilla, it'd be like, oh, one movie he's the ideal father, and then the next movie he's like this mass murderer, and they never kind of stick with it for too long. So maybe it's the flip-flopping that kind of, if people were more kind of settled into Godzilla's role rather than going back and forth, it might not feel quite so jarring. But I think going off the back of the last movie, where, you know, in Godzilla 2000, I feel Godzilla himself had quite a good character. He felt very kind of, you know, present in the film story, and everything he did sort of made sense to me. And then in the last movie we watched, it really just felt like there wasn't really anything going on with either of the kaijus, particularly.
Which was Godzilla versus Megaguirus.
Yeah, that one. And then in this movie, they really went full in, like we say, on the bastard Godzilla, which I suppose you could call him. He's either Buddy Godzilla or Bastard Godzilla, take your pick. But he's so animalistic that it's easy just to get your head around his behaviour, and I just like that. It was just easy to follow. And
they do kind of explain it away as well. I mean, because with all the Millennium Era movies, this being one of them, they're all a sequel to the 54 one. So in 54, you know, he is what he is, but then his return was, you know, he's out for revenge because of the souls that are in him, because it wasn't just the Japanese that died during this conflict in World War II. It was, you know, Americans and other Asians as well. So like they're all, you know, they're ready to attack Japan again because of that. And I think Kaneko, the director, because he is apparently a known pacifist. So I think this is his kind of take, and he's, you know, saying that not everyone was innocent during that time. You know, his own nation was guilty of certain atrocities as well. and that's that whole kind of thing. I think that's the message he was trying to convey, with Godzilla. Not I would say, like, you could even say Godzilla probably isn't that much of a bad guy. It's just the spirits that are in him wanting to seek revenge.
Yeah, it's not as clear cut. I mean, like we say, he's unpleasant in this movie, but like he's just a creature. He's like the embodiment of these spirits. I mean, he's not thinking like, I'm going to go and destroy this city because I think it's so much fun. So
that said, with the tagline, he is the god of destruction. So who knows?
I wouldn't have thought the director was a pacifist based on these fight scenes, though, because they're so brutal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's some of the more horrific ones, I think. Like, I mean, that first one with Barragan, like as she's as he's crawling away trying to get up that mountain, and he's just like blasting him with the atomic breath, and then does it again, and it just like disintegrates. It was really something.
It's great. I feel like
it was good.
As a modern viewer, obviously we watched this back in, God, when was it, like 2009 when we first watched this, and it's been another decade since then. But looking back on it, the pace of that particular fight, the Barragan versus Godzilla fight, is a little bit slow. And they could do with just cutting it a bit quicker, I would think. But I really liked all of the actual like moves, like the throws, and like the way they destroyed the whole like bus like depot was great. I like the way the ground got all like gnarled up, so you could see like these kaijus, like when they fight, it changes the terrain. That's how large they are. They don't just fight on the earth. It like really impacts the environment. And you also, because we kind of knew that Barragan was like this holy spirit sort of thing, we totally got the emotional drive behind the scene. Like, Barragan actually wants to stop Godzilla for good, so that humans are protected, or the world is protected. And it wasn't just a fight for the sake of a fight. It actually was like the story.
Yeah.
So the balance is just right. Action's great. Story's right where you need to be. Not too complicated. Not too simple. Just right on the line. And I would have sped it up a little bit, but that's just my personal preference, because I think it was solid anyway.
I mean, for myself, I think pacing was okay. They had to meet up at some point, and they had to travel from different areas. I don't know. It seemed okay to me, and I suppose they had, maybe what slowed it down was having to cut back between Yuri and like the bit with the chopper where they were commentating it like a wrestling match. That's another one of those moments where it's a bit like, is this meant to be funny?
Yes, it's sort of like the WWE type commentary. But yeah, right when the helicopter gets destroyed, they say, "Oh, the two men in the helicopter just died," but there's probably at least 3 or 4 people in the helicopter. Just they only mention the ones you actually see.
The only ones we cared about.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
It's not long after the first fight that we get introduced to the biggest pair of bollocks that ever graced planet Earth.
And this is another thing. I was like, was this intentionally funny? Because it's like they were hysterical, absolutely hysterical. They were just big white pair of balls.
Yeah, Mothra's cocoon
in the lake.
You'd almost think there was 2 things in there, because there's these 2 big white balls where Mothra's like gestating.
This isn't the first time they've had like the Mothra balls. Like this is like her usual cocoon, which I just find utterly surreal, because I actually looked up moth cocoons.
I was hoping you would have, because I'm thinking now, is it based on something?
Nope, doesn't look anything like that.
It just looks like balls.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
But the CG of when Mothra comes out of the cocoon, it still holds up pretty well. I mean, you can see it's
dated. Is it CG or is it
when she crawls out of it?
Oh,
that's definitely CG, and then they cut to a model which has like articulated wings. If anything, the only problem with the CG Mothra and the physical prop Mothra is that the prop moves very, very slowly, and the CG moves a bit too quick. So really, they should have made the CG animation a bit more. It should have imitated the model rather than imitating an actual creature.
Yeah.
And then it would have met the limitations in the middle. But that being said, there's about 3 or 4 CG shots of Mothra in this movie, and especially the one where she emerges from the cocoon. It still looks pretty good. I was impressed.
I think most of the CG, I mean, I wouldn't say it holds up as such, but it was because it was used sparingly. There's only there's the points with Mothra. There's when Godzilla falls in the water, and when Ghidorah turns into King Ghidorah, and it's like probably the most obvious CG moment. I think
the King Ghidorah one is a little bit obvious, but it's still enjoyable.
Yeah,
it serves
it's still
the
good.
movie.
It's still a spectacle.
Exactly.
So, but I did appreciate that they used it so sparingly, and they didn't shy away from their roots of, rubber suits and miniatures.
Because that's another division point, isn't it, of whether people want CG Godzilla or do they want the costume Godzilla. So
Do you think that's a point of divide? When I was talking to a friend of mine and I showed her a bit of this movie just to see her reaction, because she asked me about it, so I showed it to her, and she thought it was kind of hilarious seeing people in rubber suits. And I don't know if I'm just sort of blind to it. I'm just like, to me it doesn't look bad. Maybe just because I'm used to it.
The thing is, for me,
maybe it's modern Western audiences. They probably want something that actually looks like it's real rather than someone in a rubber suit. But it never puts me off.
To me, it's all contextual, because if you just go on like YouTube and watch these fight scenes in isolation, they're probably way more humorous than they are, action-packed kind of event scenes. But when you watch the movie and you've got the story behind it, there's an emotional weight to some of the stories. If the story's good and the fight scene gets an emotional weight behind it, then you kind of in the fight, you're watching it unfold. You're not really thinking about the effects as such, and then you get that movie making thing where you're not looking at it as a technical piece of production. You're looking at it as something that's actually happening. So even though it is laughable, when the movie operates and does what it's supposed to do, you don't think about it. And even if you are in that mode where you're like, oh, I'm looking at guys in suits here, there's still a lot of artistry there with like the way the suits are made and the miniatures of like.
I think that's kind of the way I see it, actually.
Yeah, it's all a big kind of. You can look at it either way. You can laugh at it, or you can look at it from like, oh wow, look at the production values here. They've made these props and these suits and they look great. Or you can just watch it as a part of the story and be like in awe of what's actually happening. And I think you get a bit of all three in this one, but I don't think that for all of the movie's tonal problems with making accidental jokes, I wasn't really laughing at the kaijus that much in this. Really, there's a couple.
I don't think I did at all. Really.
No, there might be one or two shots which are intentionally humorous, but not really. The movie takes quite a serious tone with the fights, which I liked. It's odd actually, because when I think about it now, there's only really 2 fights in this movie, but it feels like a whole lot more. You get the Barragan versus Godzilla one in the daytime, and then that nighttime fight where Mothra attacks Godzilla, and then it leads into the King Ghidorah fight. That's all one big thing.
I think the gaps are kind of filled with just moments of destruction. So when you're seeing the Guardians being awakened, I kind of liked how they did this. Each time they were awakened, they kind of did kill people, but the people they killed were, undesirables anyway. Like those teenagers who wanted to kill that dog by throwing it overboard, and like the stealing from that shop, and then there was that biker gang as well. And I think that was that whole kind of, don't get in the Guardian's way, otherwise you're going to perish. So if they have, like, if they had appeared on screen and started, and innocent people had died,
you wouldn't like.
When I say like nice people, you'd never sympathise with them. But anytime they did appear, the only people you'd see dying at their hand essentially were ruffians. So I thought it's obvious, it was intentional. And then when Godzilla appeared, the only people you see him killing are people strapped into hospital beds that can't get away. So it's pretty on the nose there with that.
I didn't like the dog thing so much, not because I would oppose. I could buy one nasty guy killing a dog, or even 2 or 3 nasty people killing a dog. But the way they're like, oh, these like 12 or 13 teenagers are just going to like drown this dog. I was like, you're going to quite a length to show me that these characters are nasty, so that when you kill them off, you can basically make a hero figure out of the kaiju. And I'm like, you don't need to. It's quite laboured, that one. Out of the whole movie, that was the one scene where I could pick out and say, this is probably the only bit where I would say this is a bad scene, because not the dog killing is the bad part about it, although it isn't pleasant. But they go on, they work it too hard, where it becomes kind of like
almost comical.
It's
sort of ridiculous.
It goes past believability. Where it's like,
well,
really?
That's what I was saying. Like it's so on the nose.
Yeah,
it's just like, okay, I get it. Yeah,
they could have had just one guy being nasty, and it would have been enough. But having like a whole group, it's like.
To be fair, I think it was just one girl that suggested it, and you could maybe pass it off that they were just like, oh yeah, whatever. But,
sure.
I don't know. But anyway, they died. So
it would have worked for me if they'd had one of the girls being like trying to stop them, maybe. And then it would be
Yeah,
like, oh, okay,
yeah.
among these people, not all human beings
No, but
are
then
bad.
you would start to sympathize with that one person, and
But she could like get
you've lost
away.
it.
She could get away.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you really could have done. Because I actually wanted to see them all cocooned. We never actually saw them cocooned. That
You
would
could
have been
see
nice.
Mothra like nibbling at their legs and stuff in the cocoon. One of my favourite lines in this movie that probably wasn't supposed to be funny, but maybe it was when Barragan is like charging towards the bus depot, and there are some tourists there, and the man says to the woman, "Quick, take a photo, and then we'll run."
Yeah, that's one of my favourite moments as well. Actually,
It's like something like The Simpsons. Like it's like the perfect Simpsons gag.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. She said actually in the Japanese one that she thought Barragan was cute, which is why she wanted a picture with it as well. So I thought it was quite funny. So yeah, the story for this movie, I don't know if it's a bit much. There's a lot going on, and there's some of it I haven't really pieced together in my own head. So you've got the Guardians. There's this ancient rivalry and whatever, and you've got this ghost man Isayama, who is there to reawaken the Guardians in time to fight Godzilla. And I don't know how Yuri and her mate managed to figure out that spirits are like a form of electricity and can be stored in stone, and that Isayama was getting the spirits from the stones and then putting it into the Guardians to wake them up in the same way Godzilla was awakened. But I mean, they came up with that theory, ran with it, and it turns out they were right. But it was all a bit kind of like, okay, we need a reason for why this is happening. Let's come up with a reason. And it was a bit sort of... I had to watch that scene kind of like twice. I watched it and I was like, I don't get this. Rewound, watch it again. I was like, right, okay, I'll go with it anyway. Maybe I'm thinking about it too hard, and they just needed a reason.
I find this happens in movies which have a simple yet laboured plot, though, is that they treat this very plain narrative with such, so earnestly that you as an audience member start to feel like you're missing something because it's so like heavy-handed. You're like,
yeah.
But no, really, it is very simple, and sometimes a simple idea can go right over your head because you're thinking like, yeah, too hard about it. If it had been me, I would have been like, we don't need the ghost man at all.
No.
Not needed. That's what drags the movie down a bit. You could have spent more time with Yuri, have her or somebody she's working with, like, accidentally or even on purpose, like, awaken the Guardians as part of their kind of mystery, like, TV show, which is what they do at Digital Q. It's all like mystery stuff, isn't it? So they're in place for the story to have them unleash the Guardians. But they work on this like ghost man, but it just is just like in service of nothing really, because once the monsters come out, it's kind of like they're going to fight. It's not so important really. So yeah, I would have just got rid of that character, and it would have created a lot more space for the other characters to do stuff and kind of expand.
Yeah, I feel like that did complicate it a lot more.
Especially when you're cutting back to him. He goes into the little cave where Ghidorah is, and he looks at Ghidorah's face, and then it cuts away for like a few minutes, and then it goes back to him again. He's still looking at the face, cuts away again, and it's like, well, he's been in this cave just sort of looking at King Ghidorah for like some time in the movie. Time is passing, and he's just like there, not really doing anything.
He was kind of pointless as well, because like, as you said, you could have had that role kind of being filled in by someone else, because there were moments where Yuri was having these sort of spiritual moments where she was like seeing flashbacks or things that were happening at the same time, and it's like, oh, maybe she was there to fill that role. She was there to awaken them, or had at least had the power to.
Yes.
And like that kind of seemed like the point of her, like to actually do this, but she was sort of more investigating it and seeing it unfold, but not really having any like direct impact on that story point.
Yeah, the only time where she actually does get to kind of change things spiritually is when they have that scene where she kind of appears to her father whilst he's trying to kill Godzilla at the end. Yeah. And it's just like, well, if they built up to that more throughout the movie, it would have felt a bit more earned and given her a bit more to like do. So,
by getting rid of Isayama.
Because she's not a great reporter, to be fair, either. She gets most of her information from watching other news shows. So
and her dad, who was like, no, I'm not giving you the info.
Exactly. So it's not like they really developed that part of her character so much. So
it's a shame, because I really liked her character, and like I think I said this for Godzilla 2000. Like, I would like to see those characters in another movie. Like these characters, well, at least Yuri, I would like to see in another movie.
They could have had those characters from 2000 like do
the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't make sense because the continuity is obviously leading off from the very first Godzilla movie. But, you know, they're kind of similar characters. These digital Q people are, like, chasing mysteries. And in the first, in Godzilla 2000, they had, like, the Storm Chaser Godzilla, like, trackers. So, yeah, they were kind of, like, the same in a way. And, you know, it would have been interesting to see them kind of cross-pollinate a bit. I mean, wasn't she a reporter, the woman in 2000?
Yeah, she was.
Right, so, yeah, it's just like... could have had them back, could have done it again. But I get what they're trying to do. Like Millennium is all about different offshoots, isn't it? And it's quite interesting when you think about it, like, oh, you know, what if we took this one narrative point and went in different directions from it? Like Megaguirus was very kind of futuristic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But at least it tried to be.
Well,
and this one was a bit
not
more...
futuristic. I think that's more actually the opposite, because it's like an ancient bug.
But I mean, when they had like the technology in the modern day part.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
You know, they
Sorry,
had
yes.
like the trains
with the
little
G-graspers
robots.
and stuff. Yeah.
Little katsu curry robots that nobody liked.
Oh my god, let's stop talking about this film.
I will say this about All Out Attack though, is that regardless of anything, you know, it looks really nice. I thought the actual cinematography, like just the way it was shot, looked very kind of realistic, and it was filmed in a very nice way. There were some nice handheld bits, and just the overall film quality of the filmmaking was kind of better than the previous movie.
Solid. It was very.
It just looked really kind of polished, like, and it had a nice look to it where you could almost kind of believe it was happening. It was nice.
Yeah, like because this is where this film's so strong. It's a good film, and you know it's it's a good monster.
But,
but that's it. I mean. Because if you're looking for things to enjoy, like I was doing with versus Megaguirus, then you've not really got a very good film. Whereas this, I wasn't looking for stuff to enjoy. I was just enjoying it the whole way through.
Yeah, there's no need to get distracted. It's just like, it's a good movie. So
yeah. With the Godzilla's origins in this, I think this kind of planted the seeds for like the legendary movies, the MonsterVerse ones. Because you have this, like him being like an ancient godlike creature, except it was the other way around in King of the Monsters, obviously, because Godzilla's the good guy, Ghidorah's the bad guy, and I feel like this is the film that really, that I feel like King of the Monsters was kind of basing itself on.
Well, certainly with the kaiju cast, there's a definite idea there.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if other things had leaked across as well.
It's I'm kind of glad it was these kaijus actually, because the director, he originally wanted to have Anguirus, Varan, and Barragan, but Toho weren't willing to hedge their bets on lesser known monsters. So they swapped out the roster, and it's like, put Mothra and Ghidorah in, we'll let you have Barragan. And he's like, yeah, cool.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That works better the way it is.
Yeah. It's
kind of an all-star cast in a way.
Yeah, it pays off for that. Because if it was Anguirus, Varan, and Barragan, they would have been smaller,
very similar
monsters,
creatures as well.
Yeah, they're very similar. But that was the idea, because they were going to be, they were supposed to be weaker than Godzilla, because he wanted Godzilla to be like basically indestructible in this film.
Yeah, but I mean, you could have weaker ones that don't necessarily like look the same. Like you'd have kind of three little characters that they're all little quadruped like creatures. At least with Mothra and King Ghidorah, you get a bit of visual variety.
Yeah, that's true. Which is probably why the characters are so well known for that reason. So he kind of made the characters smaller, so they look like they could be beaten by Godzilla, because Ghidorah's huge.
It's definitely noticeable
massive.
when they shrink Ghidorah down.
Yeah, his heads look tiny. It's like he's like really stubby necked.
I think when he first came on, I was like, I'm sure he wasn't as small as this the last time I watched it, and then I didn't remember that Mothra was gonna kind of give him her power when she got blown to pieces, and then you see the full size Ghidorah. But then when they go back for the kind of practical close-ups, they kind of use basically the same suit. I think it's the exact same. They film it a little bit differently to make him look a little bit bigger, but it's kind of not. But yeah, I mean, did the last fight scene live up to your memories of it?
It did, actually. It went on longer than I thought it did as well.
Yeah.
Because there was a point when I thought... Because I forgot about Ghidorah turning into King Ghidorah. So when Ghidorah died, I was like, oh, I thought there was going to be that massive explosion there, because I know it'll be the same for you. Like, our takeaway from that movie was the biggest explosion we've ever seen, and it's kind of stuck with us ever since. So I thought it was going to be at that moment, and it didn't happen. I was like, oh wait, I thought, what's happening now? I completely forgot about the King Ghidorah part. But it lived up to my memory. I enjoyed it as much as I did the first time round. I think I'm probably more critical as I've gotten older. To, you know, I can point out things like, oh yeah, story maybe is a bit complicated, blah 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 blah. But as a whole, it was still, it still lived up to my memory of it. And because I was kind of worried that it wouldn't, because I remember us liking it so much. It's like, oh, if it doesn't, I'm gonna feel quite sad about this.
Yes.
But I guess maybe for you, it didn't. But
No, not at all. I wouldn't say. The thing is that when we watched at university, our Godzilla nights were basically just us huddled around what I recall as being a fairly small CRT television.
Yeah.
And now I've got this relatively large 4K screen in my lounge, and the explosion definitely lived up to the memories. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with that. I think that my expectations of Godzilla have changed, like you're saying. I think that even though I'm always complaining about things not being shown as clearly as they could be in these new American CG movies, because I like the fight scenes in the new Legendary Picture films, but I just don't think they spend enough time with them. I guess they're really expensive, so they kind of tease you a bit, but I just want...
They like the tease, that's the thing.
Yeah, I just want clear action. Saying that, when I go back to these old movies, I miss the paciness. I need the fight scenes to be a bit more, not choppy in their cuts, but it's just odd when you see the creatures moving quite slowly. And I do think that even though this movie is one of the top tier Godzilla movies overall, there are other costume kaiju movies where they succeed in having them move a bit more quickly. And it feels
that's what they tried to do with Megaguirus, to have it a bit quicker.
And then that didn't really work, so you can't really please me, can you? But yeah, when it comes to the final King Ghidorah death strike, when he does this big blowout across the water and the whole screen just fills with flame, and Godzilla himself is like, how tall do you think he is in terms of stories? Maybe 50 stories tall?
I would say something like that, yeah.
And this explosion is easily like 4 times higher in the air and about 6 times wider.
The thing is, on the screen, we only see half the explosion because our screen doesn't go up all that way. It's just insane.
It's great. So,
it's so good.
The fight scenes are a resounding success, despite any. We're here to nitpick the movie to a certain extent. So, many criticisms can be really disregarded. And I could say that if you're a long-time Godzilla fan and you're looking to introduce somebody to the Godzilla franchise, this is a good costume one to start with. Like you said, modern day audiences maybe find it a little bit laughable and would rather see the kind of CG action movies where things are more realistic. But the story's good here, characters are good, fight scenes are pretty much perfect, really. So this is a good first Godzilla movie if you want to test the waters with some new viewers, I would say. It's
worth pointing out the person that I showed it to wasn't she's not even a fan of anything like Jurassic Park or anything like that. She's just, it's not her thing at all. So maybe not the best, yardstick there.
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to comment on this. If you don't like Jurassic Park, I don't know what's going on there.
Different strokes.
Yeah.
Would you say your favourite moment was the final fight scene? If we're going to pick a favourite moment from this movie,
it actually isn't, because like you mentioned at the beginning, we've been there to Hakone. Since we watched this movie, we've been over to Japan, had our holiday, and we went to Hakone and Mount Fuji, and we wanted to see the mountains, and we enjoyed it to an extent, but ultimately we felt like we'd spent a lot of money to kind of just sit on a bus the whole day. And it was kind of like, we're just on a coach all day long. This isn't fun. And, part of our holiday in Japan was sort of wasted. So when you get this fight scene between Barragan and Godzilla, and lo and behold, it pretty much takes place in the bus depot where we were, and the whole thing gets, obliterated. I was like, thumbs up. So I really liked seeing Barragan getting, body slammed into a bunch of, tourist coaches. It was great. It's very cathartic.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
I did like the explosion, but it was like I've been resting on the explosion as you have as well for years.
Yeah.
It's like a benchmark in my brain. I've remembered it. I've thought about it, but I didn't remember a lot of other moments. So they kind of stuck out more, and they became, by comparison, they were more enjoyable because they were sort of fresher.
Yeah. I really liked there's that scene where there's those people playing ping pong in that cabin.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of, it seems like a bit of a nothing scene, but that's in a village nearby, the village that got attacked in the 1954 movie, and the photos on the wall are actually screenshots, like they're stills from the first movie after the destruction of Godzilla.
I remember thinking that set was very impressive. It's a small set, but the way they built it, the earthquake, it was very impressive.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. And the cast in that particular scene where they're all playing ping pong, they are the people who portrayed Ghidorah, Barragan, and Godzilla in this movie.
That's cool.
Which I thought was so neat. So I would say that's probably my favourite moment, just for all those little references in there, which was quite nice.
There was a part where when Godzilla was first emerging from the water, it was like a harbour sort of setting, and the guy looked at the wall and they showed the Lucky Dragon 5 like boat on a poster on the wall, which is obviously like referencing sort of the original Godzilla inspirations. I liked that little touches like that are quite cute. That was nice.
Yeah. I was thinking of references actually. There was I don't know if they actually were, but the Shobijin twins, the Mothra twins.
Oh, that was a bit cringe.
That was a bit like, I was like, is that what they are? I'm guessing that's what they are.
It's such a half effort.
It's like, two stoic looking girls in like, all white dresses staring intently at Mothra flying overhead. It was a bit like, did they need to be there? Unless they were actually going to develop on it, or if they were going to do another movie and then they were in it.
That's pandering.
Maybe.
That's really pandering. It's like
they could have had them like near the giant testicles in the water, like not even explicitly, showing them, but
literally, isn't it?
Exactly. They could have had them there somewhere, dotted throughout, just in the background for anyone who's eagle-eyed enough to spot them, rather than just here's a shot, just to have something there. But if you're only just gonna go, just chuck them in like, oh, we need to have the twins. There you go. It's a bit like.
It's like, we criticised the Shobijin twins in King of Monsters, but by comparison, it was a fully rounded like character piece.
They had an idea.
Yeah, this was just like show two attractive women, and that's a reference. And I was like, I don't know, it was just weird. It's like when I'm guessing you've not seen it, but in Rogue One, the Star Wars movie, they show like there's just a shot of C-3PO and R2-D2 just for like one shot. They're just there for no reason, just because it's Star Wars. It's just stuff like that, which is like
they had a contract to fill.
It takes you out of the movie, doesn't it? You're watching the movie, you're enjoying what's happening, and it's just like, oh, look at this reference to our franchise, and it's just like, I don't need it. So yeah, that was a little bit cringe. They didn't need to see the women so much. But as I said earlier, I think like, this is a good movie to show, anybody who's interested in Godzilla, if you know somebody who's like getting into the franchise, this is a good place to start. Even though it's the third Millennium Era movie, you could probably watch the very first 1954 and then watch it straight after and be like, okay, I've got the classic, I've got the sort of, you can't really call it modern day anymore because it's like 20 years old, but you've got kind of a modern representation of what Godzilla is now, and then you could hop from this straight into like King of Monsters, the American one, and be like, I've got all three pieces now of kind of what Godzilla is. It creates quite a nice little trilogy almost.
Yeah, as we say each time, we think of this as, can a newcomer come to this? Because we don't really rate them as such. I think that's almost a rating in itself. So I would say, yeah, this is definitely one where you could sit someone down in front of it and, like you say, put the 54 one on first if you want to. I don't think you even need that, really. I mean, I think most people know Godzilla's origins anyway.
But yeah, it definitely gets 5 atomic blasts out of 5. That's one thing I want to add, though. Like when they have this thing where the Colonel like goes inside Godzilla's body and sets off this bomb, and then Godzilla breathes atomic breath, but it like sort of carves him into pieces. I'd like to see that reimagined in one of the legendary movies. That's a good death.
That was a good one.
It would look really good in full CG. So I'd invite a reimagining of that sequence because I really enjoyed that.
That would be lovely. Like I think for my kind of overall thoughts to this, I prefer being sympathetic towards Godzilla. and it's kind of weird having Ghidorah be the good guy. But I still loved it. I think it was, it wasn't necessary for it to be the other way around. And I like that with this Millennium Era, because each one is its own continuity. I felt like it's quite experimental, and they could really just be like, okay, what, as you said, what if this happened? What if that happened? So, and I think that was kind of this movie's strength, and I hope, I don't know, I would like to see more of that to some extent. Maybe not with the legendary ones, because they got the whole monsterverse thing, so that just wouldn't work. But if Toho are going to do more movies, I would say, play with it a bit, have fun, because you might get something good. You might get another Megaguirus, but whatever, we can ignore that.
I'd be interested to see though, actually, because we can't. I don't want them to chop and change the sympathies of the characters, but then when they have,
but to experiment.
When they do King Kong versus Godzilla though later this year, really will kind of be sympathetic towards both of those guys, and then they'll be going head to head, so it might create quite an interesting paradigm there.
Or are they going to have another enemy appear and then they team up and fight that enemy?
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, well, okay. Think about it.
I want to see some heads ripped off.
Yeah, same. It might still happen. So yeah, overall, you've given it 5 atomic blasts. I'll give it 5 testicle eggs out of 5. And I think
that's 10 out of 10 then, isn't it?
It is. We've got a great movie on our hands. So where can they find you, Graeme?
If you like listening to me, I've got a YouTube channel called Fossil Arcade where I do video game reviews, and they're pretty much just like this, except about video games. So Fossil Arcade is where to find me. But if you want to, ask Ben about Godzilla stuff, where can they do that, Ben?
Well, there's a Twitter account. It's Monster Island RP is the username, because everything else was taken. And it's Monster Island Radio on Instagram, and you can find us there.
I would like if people were to ask us about something we haven't necessarily discussed. If there's some angle towards these movies we haven't, talked about, let us know. If we're missing something,
because I feel like we kind of exist in our own little bubble.
Exactly, we don't want to be in a vacuum. So if we're missing the point, let us know, and we'll maybe
tell us where we're going wrong.
We'll discuss it. So
absolutely. Okay, so thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure to tune in next time on Monster Island Radio. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.